Hello, today is November 30th, 2006. We're at the home of Mr. Wayne Seaman. My name is Brad Hoops. I'm the interviewer for the Northern Colorado Veterans Oral History Program. Good afternoon, Mr. Seaman.
Hi.
Thank you very much for participating in this project.
Well, my daughters thought I should.
Okay. Let's start out, if we could, if you can give us a little background about yourself, when and where you were born.
I was born in Loveland, Colorado, 1921. Didn't stay there very long, until about age 5.
Where'd you guys move from there?
Fort Collins. And then my dad, he was Larimer County Assessor, and then he passed the Civil Service exam for the Tax Commission, and we moved to Denver when I was about 8 years old, 1928 or 9.
And how many siblings did you have?
I just had one sister.
Younger or older?
And she was 10 years older than I was.
Oh, okay. Okay.
However, she had 5 children, so most of my nieces and nephews were more like brothers and sisters than she was, really.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing prior to entering the service?
I was in college at A&M. It was A&M at that time, CSU now.
And do you remember where you were and what you were thinking when you heard that Pearl Harbor had been bombed?
Yeah, I know exactly where I was. I was with my wife-to-be. We were just courting in those days, but we were studying in the library at CSU. I'll say CSU. When the news came through and they announced it. I think it was a Sunday.
Yes. Uh-huh. And how much longer after that before you went into the service?
Well, I was in advanced ROTC, and I would have been directly commissioned upon graduation, but we hadn't gone to summer camp, so we had to apply for voluntary induction. And I was inducted as a corporal, and then we went directly to OCS in Fort Sill.
How much longer? What was the rough time period of that when you?
Well, we graduated in 1943. Funny thing, we graduated from college, got married, and I went in the Army all within 1 week.
When would be the next time you'd see your wife?
That was April of 1943.
When would be the next time you'd see your wife then after?
Well, this was only after OCS. She came down and lived with me then. I went back to, after OCS down there, I went to Battery Executive School.
Where was OCS again?
Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
And I got into Battery Executive School there and got to shoot for the school troops. And kind of interesting, after I got to a unit, I'd fired more live rounds than anybody else in the outfit, including the higher officers.
How come?
Because I shot for all the OCS. That's good. Being a battery executive means you're in charge of a firing battery. You give the fire commands. And they had school troops down there that shot for all the OCS schools. And they shot every day. So I had a month of solid artillery shooting. It was fun. Interesting, anyway.
Yeah.
Except we had a lot of old ammunition, World War II, World War I ammunition. We had a lot of muzzle bursts and things like that. A lot of misfires.
And then from that training, you went to?
Well, we had our choice. We had marked first, second, and third choices. And so several of us thought that we were kind of gung-ho. Everybody was in those days. So we saw 4th Armored Division on there. We thought, well, they're about ready to go. So we signed up for 4th Armored Division. They took 6 of us. And so we went to Camp Bowie in Texas, which is out of Fort Worth. This was in, well, I was in, let's see, graduated in April, went to OCS for the summer. We had an extra month of battery exec school. So it was about September that we moved to Fort Worth and went on to Camp Bowie, which is out of Brownwood, Texas. So I was there during the fall. And I joined the 4th Armored Division in the battalion there. The fellows that were with me went in the other two battalions. And one of them went to a tank battalion as well, at that time they had a tank that had a mortar on it, a little howitzer, and he went there as a artilleryman for the mortar tank. Yeah. He later became a tank platoon commander because of the turnover. There's big turnover in tankers.
Wow.
Some tank battalions had over 200% casualties.
Wow. So from Texas then, after training,
well, in Texas,
that's where you linked up with the 4th?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, we got a call up in December, so I was there from about September to December, just about two or 3 months, and that was, I had to leave wife and everybody then. We were headed overseas. Kind of strange. We didn't know where we were going, of course. We got in the troop train. First thing I know, we're in New Orleans, crossing the causeway in Lake Pontchartrain. And we figured, well, we must be going over to Florida or somewhere and shipping out and going through the canal and going to the Pacific. But we got over about Georgia and started north. It seemed an awful long ways around to go, but we ended up passing through New York and keeping going and ended up in Boston, Camp Miles Standish. And we shipped out of Camp Miles Standish. This was right around Christmas.
Christmas of 1943?
43.
Okay, uh-huh.
And we were on the ocean between Christmas and New Year's in 43.
Can you talk a little bit about the passage, what that was like?
It was rough and it was cold. And it was the North Atlantic in winter and very rough. And those, we were on a smaller fruit boat, really, called it a banana boat, which it really was. It was one of the fruit boats that they ran between South America and North America with bananas. But it was a nice little ship, and they had a West Indian crew, and it was faster than the other boats. And the first night out, we broke a steam line, and they were happy because we figured, well, we'll get away from this darn slow. Any of the, am I moving too much?
Yep.
Of course, going in a whole series of ships, you go only as fast as the slowest ship. And I figured, well, if we could last long enough, we can go off on our own and be there before them. Anyway, it took 10 days to get across the Atlantic.
Did you make it across without getting seasick?
Me, yes, but closest I came to getting sick was taking care of other guys. That kind of reminds me of a slave ship. It must have smelled. Because I didn't get sick, I smoked cigars and chewed snooze, and so they made me a mess officer one day. Kind of a funny story. Well, the kids that come in there, they ate standing up on these higher tables, and he gets his meal and he starts looking at it. I gotta have some air. And he went over and undogged a porthole, which is really a no-no, I guess. Anyway, the ship rolled and a solid stream of water the size of the porthole just came through and just wiped out the mess hall. That really teed off the sailors. Anyway, and I saw a guy washed overboard.
Huh.
And in fact, I saw him as I happened to be out on the side, looking over, and there he went by, and he had been up on the bow. And so after that, they roped off the bow. It was too rough. Anyway, destroyer picked him up about 15 minutes, but he's already dead. In that North Atlantic water, he didn't last very long.
Yeah.
How anybody lived or ate on those, or even existed on those destroyers was beyond me, because they just disappeared behind those waves.
Was there a lot of worry too of the German U-boats? Did you have any? Were you harassed by them at all?
I don't know. We had once in a while the destroyers would take off and run around like madmen. Nothing ever happened. Krauts probably had enough sense not to be out in weather like that. Of course, they're underneath. Anyway, we ended up going into the Bristol Channel and landing it around Cardiff in Wales. Or up at Bristol anyway. And I went into, my division was headquartered in a little town called Devizes, which is near the Salisbury Plains, near the Stonehenge, really. Let's see, now this was January, and the invasion was June, so I was in England for 6 months. Got to go to London a couple of times. Did the tours a bit.
Yeah. How'd the locals treat you?
Well, they liked our money, and of course the women liked it. Of course, the standard limey thing was trouble with the Yanks are they're overpaid, oversexed, and over here.
Yeah.
But in general, I got along. It's just that I like the Canadians better than the Limeys, but they were allies. Yeah. I really appreciated the English after seeing the results of the blitzes. I appreciated their fortitude.
Were you aware? Had you got newsreels and such back? Were you aware of what had gone through in the Blitz?
Well, you don't realize it until you get there.
Yeah.
I was in one air raid in England.
Was
I naturally wanted to run out and see the airplanes and them, but well, they had barrage balloons and all that over London and a lot of, and when they had a raid, why the sirens would go off, of course, and everybody would take shelter, but searchlights would go on. I went out and watching the searchlight go around until the shrapnel from the anti-aircraft gun started bouncing around me, so that was enough for that. I went back under my hole. But going back to my hotel for the night, just a half a block from where we were, the house had been hit and just sheared in two. It was hit or miss. They couldn't miss London, of course, but they didn't know what they were bombing. They were just dropping bombs.
Yeah. So you're in England for 6 months. And were you part of the invasion, D-Day invasion?
No, I wasn't, but I certainly knew that we certainly knew that the invasion was going on, because I never saw so many airplanes in the air at once, ever, before war change.
Describe that if you could. What you?
Well, just steady strings of bombers and fighters going in and out, in and out, in and out. And then, of course, we were preparing our tanks and stuff for our waterproofing. And then we were going down the embarkation points. We knew we were going pretty soon, but it was about 2 weeks later.
Had you gotten word back how things were going over there? Had you?
Oh yeah, we got very good
Yeah.
news. They weren't very, very far in there. They weren't very far inland when we got there. About 6 or 8 miles. That's kind of humorous too, for a story, really. Here we were. Went over to LST.
Landing ship tank.
Yeah. I was the third tank in a row of going out. Well, there were only 3 tanks in our headquarters division, and all forward observers, and I was FO3. And anyway, I guess about 6 hours or so between tides, and we went up in the higher water and waited for the tide to go out. And let the door down. Realized we weren't under fire at this time.
Yeah.
The beach was taken. And everybody else started unloading, and come to find out, we let our door down right on a great big old bomb crater, and we couldn't get out until somebody filled it in. The beach master came in. Well, we'll get a bulldozer over here pretty soon. So I don't know how long pretty soon was, but a long time. And the water started lapping up again. Here came the bulldozer and started throwing sand in the hole. In the meantime, water was lapping up and lapping up and lapping up. The tide was coming back in. Finally he says, well, I guess we'll try one or two. First tank off. First tank went off. Okay, one more. Well, I thought, well, they're not going to let me go. And they said, well, maybe just one more. So I went off. And this was getting on towards dark. And we didn't know where to go. Everybody else in our division had gone. They left the beach and were gone somewhere. Nobody knew the slightest thing. And all the beach master wanted to say was, get the hell off the beach. So we got off the beach. But there we were, 3 little tanks in France. And it was getting dark. And Krauts always sent over a bed check Charlie as soon as it got dark.
What was a bed check Charlie?
Just probably a Dornier bomber. And he'd bomb the beach and they'd shoot at him. In fact, the whole beach would erupt in fire. After he dropped his bombs, he'd go. And that was it. That was kind of a nightly, why I call him bed check Charlie. And anyway, that excited us. So we didn't know what to do, so we just pulled off into an orchard. And when all the shooting started, we just crawled under the tank and we spent the night there. And it was almost all next day before we found out anybody that knew where we were supposed to go, but we finally found ourselves. Went into not far out of Carenton, the swamps there around Carenton. And it was still infantry fighting in those days, still hedgerow stuff. Interesting about the beach, I don't know, did you ever see Saving Private Ryan? That was the only one I saw that showed dead fish on the beach. Of course, all the explosions on the beach had naturally dead fish. All the other war stories never showed the dead fish. Anyway, I thought that was kind of neat to show dead fish.
What was the beach like? You said you landed 2 weeks later. Can you describe what the beach was like at that point?
Well, there's still a lot of busted up material and stuff. And some of they'd blown most of the beach iron obstacles the Krauts had put in by then, but it was still pretty much a mess. But they were cleaning it up and we were getting supplies in pretty well by then. Well, then starts the war. We didn't do anything for a couple of weeks. Except get over to France and think we're going into battle, and we were doing around just maintenance work and drilling. We thought we had enough of that. But anyway, they finally decided that they'd send our armored infantry out in to replace some of the 4th Infantry Division. Now this is 4th Infantry. We were the 4th Armored. So some of the 4th Armored Division infantry went up and replaced some of the 4th Infantry. The Krauts knew immediately they had some green guys. I was a forward observer with them then, went up there. The hedgerow country was a mess. dates back to the feudal times, really, when everybody had a little field of their own, and they cleared all the rocks and piled them for a row of kind of a fence, and then over the years, dirt and plants have grown in on it and made a solid row, and trees have grown on it. And so you have all this series of little fields with trees and bushes separating them. And you couldn't see anything hardly with it. To shoot artillery, you had to do it pretty much by sound and shooting smoke shells to see where they landed the first ones. Anyway, big battle. Battle for us would be to take a couple of hedgerows a day, which is 200 or 300 yards. And like it's not by the Krauts would counterattack about 4 o'clock, which they like to do, and take it all back, maybe add one more backwards for all that way. I thought, well, I'm never going to get out of Normandy. I'm not going to live long enough to get out of Normandy at this rate. But then came the St. Lo bombing, which you probably heard of, where they bombed frontline slit trenches, which is a little ridiculous, but it worked after a fashion. We pulled back about a half a mile, and it was another big air show. See them come over and see. So it was kind of sad to see those big bombers getting hit and diving down, but then our fighters coming down and diving on the flak batteries. Interesting. But anyway, they started dropping all these bombs, all these heavy bombers, 25s and B-17s and B-24s and 5s. And we were pulled back half mile. We were laying on the ground with on our elbows and still bouncing up and down because of the bombs hitting up there.
A half a mile away, you said, and still bouncing?
Yeah. Some flak plinking around on us. I mean, pieces of it. But anyway, after it was over, we went up and it worked because there were Krauts running around bleeding from the mouth.
Can you describe the scene, what the bombing damage, what it looked like?
Just a bunch of churned up earth. Anyway, that was the start of the breakthrough. We cranked up the tanks. We broke through the Avalanches. And after that, it became a weird war. We would be going down the road one way, and the Krauts would be going down the road the other. We didn't even know the other one was there. Huh. Now, when we went in, we had invasion panels, which is kind of a fluorescent pink thing that we put on the back of our vehicles so that our Air Force, our fighter planes, really mostly Jugs, which were P-47s, good airplane for ground support, would know who was who, because a German half-track and American half-track look about alike. Tanks look a little different. Anyway, the Germans still used quite a bit of horse-drawn artillery. We were just coming up to the top of a rise, and all of a sudden I looked off, and a flight of 4 P-47 just peeled out over my head and came straight down at me. Oh. And then those 850s started blaring, you know, and that's noisy, and I was out there trying to shake my panel, showing them who I was, but they weren't shooting at me. We were just coming to the top of the hill, and they were shooting right over our head, and we were catching up to a horse-drawn artillery battery, German horse-drawn artillery battery.
And you couldn't see him because you were on the other side of the hill?
I figured that was pretty close support.
Huh.
Figured I'd always buy a drink to Jug pilots when I found it. I finally found one in Aspen after the war, and we did have several drinks. Huh. They were a good support airplane. Big thing for a fighter. And our planes had invasion stripes too. Three white stripes on each wing. Because the Focke-Wulf looks a little like a P-47. Except it has more square wingtips. But it's got a radial engine too.
Were you equipped to fire on German airplanes when they came?
Oh, I had a 50 on the tank. One time we were trying to take a rest stop in a column, and we were eating our rations or something, and we were talking about German airplanes, and I said, we looked up and there's a plane coming. I said, the German planes smoke more than ours. And we thought it's a P-47 come see now, but I said, but the P-47 smoke a little. So here comes one now. See, it's smoking. We all looked at it and then said, hell, that's not me. That's a German. And we weren't in our tank, but Major, my outfit, was there. He jumped up on our tank and unlimbered my 50 and took a crack at it as it went over, and he did hit it. And a little piece of the belly of the thing fell down. It was plywood. We kept that for quite a while.
Huh.
He didn't get it, but he hit it,
yeah.
Which is pretty darn good. I was shooting a pistol at him, which is ridiculous.
So you're working your way across France at
this is a breakthrough. And after we broke through it at ranches, our supply troops were doing more fighting than we were. And we went down and cut off the Brittany Peninsula at Saint-Nazaire and Lorient, where the submarine pens were. And we were sitting there when drove into a rest camp. They had submarine rest camps and prowling around looking at them. These big Butler buildings are on there like that, prefab metal buildings. My sergeant, tank sergeant, came up to me and says, "Hey, Lieutenant, get on the radio and call S2, S3 rather, and tell them we found a gold mine down here and bring all our 6x6s they can get." And so I went with him in there, and there was this Butler building from floor to ceiling, with just case after case of champagne and cognac. And I said, "My word, you have found a gold mine." And there are other outfits around the area, so I called it up on the radio, and we got every spare vehicle we could think of down there to load them up. And there's some 500 men in our battalion, and we had enough to give every man of us 2 quarts of champagne and 2/5 of cognac. And then, of course, since we found it, we had a lot more than that. We found out that either one of the bottles just fit a 75 millimeter shell rack in a tank. So we threw out half a basic load of ammunition, loaded up with booze. Then word came down, "You're going to get 3 days rest," and it sounded like machine guns with all the champagne corks are popping. But Lorient that was too tough a nut for us to crack. It was surrounded by flak batteries, 88s mostly. An 88 will really punch a hole in the tank.
Was the 88 the one they used for anti-aircraft, and they just turned down on the ground?
Had a shell that looked like an .6, only it was about 4 feet high. It was neck down. Actually, our 90 millimeter is about the same. But we didn't. The Germans put bigger guns on their tanks. They had better tanks than we did, didn't they? Their Panther and their Tiger were well armored. Our tanks only had 4 inches front slope plate armor, 2 inches on the side. The only reason we did better than they did is because they didn't bunch their tanks and we were faster. And we'd sneak around the sides. They weren't well armored in the back or under the base, under the belly.
Can you talk a little bit about the life of a tanker? It seems like everybody I've ever interviewed always said the infantry and the tankers had it the worst off in the war. What was life like in the tanker, as a tanker? What was it like inside a tank?
Claustrophobic. And well, for me anyway, I seldom traveled with my hatches shut unless we were getting mortar fire or something. I like to be able to see out. Of course, got wounded once that way too. Second time I got wounded, I was glad I had it open though, because I got out. But tank was kind of fun at times. At least you could carry a bedroll and something to eat. Something to eat being rations. We lived on rations. We didn't have anything to eat hardly.
Did you? It felt like you got enough to eat?
Oh yeah, you got enough to eat. It just
was it quantity?
Mostly K rations and 10 and 1s. 10 and 1s weren't bad. 10 and 1 worked fine for a tank crew of 5. But the K rations were, we'd eat all the breakfast first. That was the best because it had kind of a egg and bacon thing for breakfast, which is pretty good. And we'd eat the lunches next because it had cheese. The last things were the suppers were corny meat and crummy because they had some kind of a horrible pork something or other. Kind of like a spam.
Yeah.
So we figured when we were down to eating suppers while we were getting towards the end of the K ration business. When we went, also when we were in this rest camp, when we relieved the booze in, we got a bunch of cases of German, well, I don't think they were German, I think they're probably from Spain or Portugal, but they were sardines, and they were real good. Mustard sauce and tomato sauce, one thing. So we ate German sardines for there quite a while. Germans kind of liked our prisoners liked our rations, and we liked their stuff. They had good cheese.
I talked to a number of infantrymen who said that one thing they used to do when the tanker wasn't looking, they'd go up and steal your chocolate. You guys were issued chocolate bars, or?
Oh, a D ration, if you call that anything. I don't know who would want it. They had a D ration bar, which is just some kind of unmeltable chocolate. I thought how I called it. We had a joke saying that you'd always tell when you first went through a French town, whether nothing was too good for you. And the women would kiss you, and they'd give you flowers and wine and one thing and another. And we'd throw cigarettes. They really liked cigarettes and these D ration bars out to the kids. And they said we can always figure where the Yanks have been before, because if you throw a D ration bar out to the kid and he throws it back at you, you know we've been there before. But they decided, let's see, the war's getting along now. The Germans had a counterattack behind us, which didn't work, fortunately. Or we'd have been one division cut off in Brittany. That Filet Gap thing, I don't remember that or not. Well, they tried to come back and cut off, but it didn't work. By that time we had a lot of stuff coming in, other armored divisions too. And word got down we were going to Paris. So we set out on about a 400-mile road trip. Went.
How much could a tank do in a day? How much land would it cover?
Oh, you could cover probably 50 or 60 miles if you had the gas for it. But you'd have to re-gas. They could get about 30 miles an hour. They'd get along, but when you get in the column, you got to go. Column collapses and then goes forward. At night, this just makes it a little tough when you're driving with just blackout lights. Scares the heck out of. There's a Jeep in front of us that makes you scare the heck out of them at night when we come roaring up behind them. They didn't know whether we were going to quite stop or not. Anyway, we got about 40 miles out of Paris, and they stopped us. We could have gone ahead and taken Paris, but they wouldn't let us. So they let de Gaulle come and take them. Which was all right with us, I guess, except we never did see Paris.
Huh.
While we were there, we were sitting around one day, and we decided to take a Jeep, and we looked at the map and saw this town, this fair-sized town on the Loire River, not too far from us. Blois, B-L-O-I-S, Blois, I don't know. My French wasn't very good. And so we drove there, but we went past all the outposts of the U.S. Army. Last thing I could think of was that anti-tank gun pointing down the road after we just passed them. I think you could have driven to Berlin and nobody would have stopped you. Until they shot at you. Anyway, we get to this little town and going into it while the Maquis, the Free French, were holding the bridge, and they almost shot us until they finally looked at our funny-looking Jeep, and then nothing was too good for us. Huh. So there were 3 lieutenants and a driver liberated the town of Blois. They wanted to know, they said the Germans were just across the river, did we want to go look at them? I said, no, we don't care about that. And they just said, one of the guys said, well, we'd like to have a drink. Oh, well, come with us. And so they took us off into some little farmhouse and supplied us with booze. And we got all snoggered up and then had to go back that night, and it got dark, and all I could think about was that anti-tank gun of ours out there, but he never did shoot at us, fortunately. Anyway, that's the only town I ever took by myself. Then we moved south of Paris, south and east of Paris. Then moving pretty fast, we started capturing Germans right and left. And then already we caught a bunch of them in Normandy, of course.
Did you have much interaction with the prisoners?
Some of them.
Yeah.
Some of them could speak a little. Most of them. Depends what kind they were. When the first outfit we met in Normandy was the SS Das Reich, and any of the Schutzstaffel guys were good. They were good soldiers. But the regular run-of-the-mill army was a bunch of kids, really. They were draftees, and later on they got younger and younger.
Yeah.
But anyway, we went on into Blois-Sans and then on up to about the Moselle. And up over the Moselle, we were south of Metz a ways. The Moselle lies in a big valley in there, and we were up on the sides of it. I'd do some little long-range artillery fire there. Got to see some good aerial battles there, and we'd be up on this ridge and watch P-47s and Messerschmitt Me-109s mostly duke it out.
And the dogfights?
Yeah.
Huh. Wow.
We saw quite a bit of the Luftwaffe. Everybody says, where's the Luftwaffe? We saw enough of it. One time we were swimming in a canal, and a bunch of them came over and were strafing. You don't feel more naked than you are when you really are swimming in the middle of the canal. But they weren't after us. They were after a flag battery near us, which our own, an aircraft outfit, which was a mistake for them. First couple dove down on it, and the next 3 never made it out of the dive. They just, these quad 50s just opened up on them up and down there. They just never pulled out of their dives.
Huh.
I saw a lot of airplanes shot down.
Wow.
In France, gliders. I never saw a whole glider any time when I was in Normandy. The guys used to look for gliders, particularly because they like to get the compass out of them, because it had ethyl alcohol in the compass, and they drained the alcohol out of it. Anyway, we're at the Moselle now.
What time, roughly, time period is this at when you're at the Moselle?
It's September.
Okay.
Well, it's the end of August, start of September. And one of the infantry divisions finally got a pontoon bridge across for us. They had a lot of trouble putting that in. They got it shot up several times. But anyway, we crossed the Moselle, south of Metz, and within the end, towards the end of some of my story, I was there. I went out with the 37th Tank Battalion. When, incidentally, the 37th Tank Battalion was led by Creighton Abrams. You heard of the Abrams tank?
Mm-hmm.
It's named after him.
Hmm.
He was a great tank commander, really a good one. The Germans respected him. It was his division of relief Bastogne, his battalion. And I was with Abrams both times I was wounded. Anyway, one day, out on an OP, and we captured some guys. And then the next day, we went up to a little town, not a little town, a fair sized town. Troyes, Troyes, Troy. We were up on the hill above that too. My combat command, the division was separated into two different combat commands. Mine was going to go in and take the town, so we went in. And we suffered some casualties on the way in, but anyway, we fought our way into the middle of the town square, and come to find out, we ran into some more SS troops. They were there out of Holland for a rest. It was just our luck to run into them while they were in rest area. Anyway, we had this town square, which is a pretty sizable square, about half the size of this park, and around it were buildings about 3-4 stories high, and all kinds of explosions going around everywhere, of course. This little Frenchman came out. I had my tank guarding one road there. And the little Frenchman came out and says, "Boss, you see, come with me." So I went out with him. He went into this building across from me and up to the 4th floor. And he's going, "Boss, you see," and we walked across the door and looked down on the far, next block. I looked out and there's another. He was right. It was another German artillery outfit, horse driven. And after that, I was shushing him. But anyway, the next day we had a lot of wounded and needed supplies, and so they decided they could spare me the most, along with about 3 half-tracks to go out and get some help. Takes a few wounded out. And on the way out, Minenwerfer, which is it's like one of our bazookas, only they were kind of spring-loaded or some darn thing. Took a crack at me. Fortunately, he missed, but he went right in front of me and blew a wall down next to me and got my attention. And I was tracking the tank towards him. I had my hatch open, and it was just a 20 millimeter, a little 20 millimeter outfit. But they loaded him a ball, armored piercing, and an explosive. An explosive wasn't very big in a 20 millimeter, but Anyway, I saw this. The ball hit my. I had a helmet hanging over the vein sight. The tank hit that. The ball hit that, and I saw a flash go in front of my eyes, and an explosion on it. The explosion went hit the hatch by my head, and just filled my back and neck with a bunch of fine stuff. It didn't hurt much. See, I still got a piece in my. I never noticed that until I got back later. Just encapsulated now. It's very small. Well, you can see it's just.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, I wasn't hurt bad enough to be sent anywhere, so they kept me around the battalion and picked junk out of my back. And 2 weeks later, I was out again and went with. It's a rainy day, and I was out with Abrams in his tank. I was with a light tank, and I didn't like to go with the lights because they were a lot faster than I was, and I was the biggest target. But anyway, we were up on a hill. I didn't have sense enough to get underneath it a little more with all these light tanks, and we were getting plinked at by an 88 way out there, and he was way out there a good mile. Too far for any tank to shoot, so I decided to start adjust some artillery on him, and he was meantime bouncing them around me. So I was an artilleryman, and I always figured the diffusion dispersion rather, he couldn't get me, but I was wrong. And he put one in right under the 75. Guys told me later it went out the rear engine doors. It may still be going for all I know.
Huh.
Our tanks carried a lot of gasoline. And once they get hit, there's just a big puff of flame. You got a lot of incentives to get out, but I had a busted leg and I couldn't get out. And finally I managed to crawl up to the top and pull myself over with the flame flicking around me. You get a lot of incentive. And then my sergeant came out after me, and we both fell off the top. And he, between his knee and his shoe was just the Achilles tendon. So I guess the shell hit him in the leg. It was not a tank shell, so it was solid. And my gunner, corporal, who was in the tank, in the seat right in front of me, stopped most of the stuff that would have hit me, except for the busted leg. And some guys came, a couple of medics came by, and they got up there and they got him out, but his entrails were hanging down to his knees. He died a few hours later.
Huh.
And my driver and assistant driver never got out. They had their hatches shut. I hope they were killed outright because fire is a bad death. But that was my war. Then I was sent back to Nancy from a field hospital. And I was there for, now this was September. And we were running out of gas anyway. I had burns, and I had bandage all over my leg. I was lucky that it had been raining because I had on a field jacket and a tanker jacket and a raincoat also, and as well as my tank helmet. And so the only thing that was exposed were my face and my hands. And I was burning pretty bad on this hand because I was licking around me. I got a skin graft after I got back to England. And they shipped me from Nancy in France to England. And I was in England from then until December. So that was my year of the war, really, of the battle, but I was still in the Army. I stayed in Fitzsimmons for another year and a half.
Wow.
Got pretty tired of Army hospitals.
So you were evacuated back to the States in December of 44?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
And I was lucky to get to Fitzsimmons because my wife was working in Lakewood School District as a secretary to Fletcher Miller, who was their principal at that time. So she could ride the streetcar out to see me a long ways from where she lived. We reached out to Fitzsimmons. But
so you're at Fitzsimmons recovering for a year and a half?
yeah. They were going to take my leg off for a while, but they decided not to. Or I didn't. I'm glad they didn't because I could use it later on in life. But I was in traction for so long, I was hit right above the knee, and I only had about a yay long bone, and it knitted at an angle and shortened the leg and froze up my patella, my kneecap. So they went and did an operation that they wouldn't do nowadays. But at that time, they did what they call a quadriceps plasty. Went in and they cut out about 4 inches on each side of the quadriceps muscle, and then wired it back there, and then cracked all the adhesions while I was out. Then that gave me knee motion all right, but then I had no muscular, and muscle hadn't taken over yet. I couldn't raise or lower, and I flapped along like a paddle foot. It took quite a while. So I had a long siege in the hospital, but they did fine. And I was retired for disability, which helped a lot during our later years raising a family. So now what do you want to do? I'm in the hospital and I haven't got out yet, but I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, how long, and then after that year and a half, were you discharged then, or were you, after you recovered, or how much longer were you in the service, considered in the service till they discharged?
I was retired, I discharged right from Fitzsimmons. Retirement board that I went before, and they decided I wasn't worth much anymore. Although it came Korea, why they sent me a notice saying that disability retired officers may be recalled for teaching purposes, but they never did for Korea, which was all right with me. I didn't want to go back. Once out of the Army, I don't want anything else to do with it.
Yeah.
I had some funny stories and some interesting times.
How do you think, well, obviously, physically, it played a very big part in your life, but how do you think the war changed your life or affected your life? Any thoughts on that part of your life and how it affected to now?
It matured me, certainly. It also hardened me a lot. I don't know if that's good or bad. Yeah. I killed people. One place in Brittany, I saw the streets run with blood. I thought that was just a figment of somebody's imagination, but it wasn't. Our tankers catching up with horse-drawn outfits. Horses have a lot of blood, and the streets literally ran with blood.
Well, I guess then, as we're getting closer to winding down this interview, I'm trying to think. Did your war disability? Were you able to go on and have a career after the war? Or
in a way. See, before the war, I graduated in forestry, and after the war, I came back and took the junior forester exam, a federal civil service exam. And with my 10 points veterans preference, I was second high in the nation. Huh. But I couldn't pass a physical to get in the Forest Service, so that was it. So I went back to college on a GI Bill and got a master's degree in game management. And I went to work for a game and fish department. At that time it was game and fish, later on it became Division of Wildlife. As a fishery biologist, and that was my working life for 31 years. Fish squeezer. I eventually got up to be a head of the fish division. And then I came up to move to Fort Collins to head up the fish research division. Retired from there. Had a good life in my chosen field. Interesting life.
After the war, did you keep in touch with any of your buddies, or anybody from?
Yeah,
from
but
the
now
war?
most of them are dead.
Yeah.
I didn't, not so, one of the guys that went, well, two of them that went with me, two were killed over there, and two of them came back over. One was a farmer up here out of Berthoud, and the other guy was a coach, ended up being baseball coach, Earl Ferguson, up at CSU. And we always told everybody that talked to us that he and I won the war. He had a funny story too. I hadn't seen him for quite a while. He came back with his points after the war, and we met. And I noticed he had a Purple Heart, and I said, I didn't even know you got hit by that. And he said, how'd that happen? He said, well, I don't tell everybody how that happened. He says, we were in Germany going down the Autobahn, and 88 took a crack at us and missed me and hit a telephone pole right by me. And broke the telephone pole off, and the telephone pole came off and came down, hit him on the head and drove him into the tank. And his gunner got on the radio and said, oh, the lieutenant's dead, the lieutenant's dead. And he says, by the time I got back, they had my papers all made up, so I got a Purple Heart out of it. Of course, he wanted those because it got you out of the Army faster with points.
Now, were you awarded, obviously you would have been awarded one for your leg, but were you awarded a Purple Heart for your first injury?
Yeah, behind you there, underneath, lift that.
Okay.
That's the 4th Armored Division patch. I got the patches themselves are under there too.
Okay. Well, I'll videotape this when we're done with the interview. You
Lift that. That's in there. No, you're lifting the wrong thing. No, lift that up. The patch was there. But I don't know what happened. Oh, you got it in your hand.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Well.
Okay, I got a Silver Star. That was my one good medal. I got 2 Purple Hearts. You can see the oak leaf cluster on there. Got a ETO ribbon with 3 Battle Stars. Normandy, Northern France, and Germany. I just barely made the Germany one. You had to cross from Moselle to get that. And I also can wear, as you see on the right hand side there, a presidential unit in the picture, a presidential unit citation, which my division got for relieving Bastogne. And I get to wear it because I was in the division.
Yeah.
But I wasn't there.
Well, now when you were, that leads to a good question too. Once you were wounded and evacuated, were you getting word back about how your unit was doing? Were you getting any idea where they were and how things were going for them? Was there communication back and forth, or
no? Not just what I read in the papers. And once in a while I get a letter from somebody, but very seldom.
Yeah.
They were too busy. When you're in a combat unit, you don't have much time to write.
Yeah.
You write to your wife or something.
That's another question too. How was communications between you and back home?
Good. My wife still got all of them. Well, my kids got them now because my wife ended up with Alzheimer's and she's next door.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm here.
Yeah.
Because this is the only place I could find where I could go and visit, back and forth, visit her in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
I wasn't always in a wheelchair, obviously. If you look up on the wall, I was an extra with the Denver Post one time at Spanish team. When I was back when I was just a fish manager.
Well, as we wind down this interview, was there anything that I didn't ask you, or anything that you would like to talk about, or before we close off, and any final comments you'd like to make?
Well, nothing particular. My war, of course, was interesting to me, but personally, but there's nothing exclusive about it at all, because there were 18 million of us in World War II, and we're down to 5 million or less now. But everybody wanted in the darn thing. It's different from the later wars. It wasn't looked down on. Like
did your war experience, did that determine your thoughts on war from then to this point, as far as the various conflicts we've been in? Do you have any opinions about that?
Oh, I've got some, but I'm no peacenik. But I've got to see a reason for a couple of them, namely the last two. Korea had some validity, but not a lot. And I don't think Vietnam or Iraq had any particularly.
Yeah.
But that's just I can say anything I want now. I don't know. I like MacArthur. He just fade away. But World War II, we were gung-ho. Everybody was. And you wanted in it. You wanted in it badly. One thing, this is I'm coughing here, so it reminds me that every ration, everybody and his brothers smoked. There were cigarettes in the rations, and they were great trade material with all the Frenchmen. And all I can say is, I wish to hell I'd never smoked.
Is that when you started smoking, when you got in the service, or had you smoked?
Oh, I smoked before then.
Yeah.
But I didn't smoke cigarettes a lot. I was quite a pipe and tobacco. Cigar smoker though. I'd trade cigarettes for cigars. In the tank you couldn't smoke much, so I'd chew and snooze, which is a worse habit than smoking and harder to break. Anyway, I ended up with COPD, and that's why I've got that oxygen thing over there. I use it at night. I don't need it in the daytime.
Yeah.
But if I can say anything, why, don't smoke.
Yeah. Did you ever have a chance to travel back to Europe, to the various places?
Yeah, I never got to. I got within about 40 miles of where I was, but I never got to the actual sites. I was on a tour, and so I couldn't.
Ah, okay.
I had guys send me pictures of Utah Beach. I've been over there. I didn't ever see that again either.
Okay. Well, we'll like I said, unless there's anything else you'd like to say, we'll conclude this interview.
Fine.
Okay. I want to once again thank you for participating in the program, and more importantly, I want to thank you for your service to our country.
Well, thank you. As I say, it's not unique.